In a landmark decision that will be studied for years to come, the United States Supreme Court has taken a bold step by blocking President Donald Trump's broad use of emergency powers to impose sweeping tariffs on foreign goods. This ruling is not just a routine legal development, it represents a significant moment in the ongoing debate over the balance of power between the executive and legislative branches of government. The decision sends a clear message that even in times of perceived crisis, the president's authority is not without limits, especially when it comes to matters that directly impact the nation's economy and international relationships. The ruling marks a historic reassertion of congressional authority over trade, setting new, stricter limits on presidential power. For decades, Congress has delegated significant authority to the executive branch to act swiftly in the name of national security or economic emergency. However, the Supreme Court's decision reaffirms that the power to regulate trade fundamentally belongs to Congress, as outlined in the Constitution. Lawmakers from both parties have long debated the risks of unchecked executive action, and this verdict is likely to spark renewed discussions about the proper role of each branch in shaping America's economic destiny. For years, the Trump administration used tariffs as a primary foreign policy tool, arguing that tough measures were necessary to protect American industries and jobs. The president's approach often bypassed traditional diplomatic channels, relying instead on the threat or imposition of tariffs to force negotiations with trading partners. But today, the nation's highest court has decisively intervened, signaling that such sweeping actions require a stronger legal foundation and, crucially, the involvement of Congress. The decision directly challenges the America First Doctrine, which relied heavily on the president's ability to act unilaterally on trade matters. By curbing this power, the Supreme Court is not only reshaping the tools available to the executive branch, but also prompting a broader national conversation about how best to defend American interests in a complex global marketplace. Supporters of the ruling argue it restores necessary checks and balances, while critics worry it could weaken the country's negotiating position. By striking down tariffs imposed under emergency declarations, the Supreme Court dismantles a key pillar of the previous administration's trade strategy. This move is expected to have far-reaching consequences not only for current trade disputes, but also for future presidents who may seek to use similar powers. Legal experts say the decision sets a precedent that will influence how emergency powers are interpreted and applied in the years ahead. This could de-escalate ongoing trade wars, alter the dynamics of negotiations with both allies and rivals, and bring a new level of predictability to the global economy. Businesses that have faced uncertainty due to sudden tariff changes may now find it easier to plan for the future. At the same time, America's trading partners are reassessing their strategies, knowing that the path to new tariffs will now require broader political consensus in Washington. The world now watches to see how the United States and its trading partners will adapt to this new reality. As the dust settles, the decision is likely to reshape not only U.S. trade policy, but also the global economic landscape, influencing how nations interact, negotiate, and compete in the years to come. The Supreme Court's ruling stands as a powerful reminder of the enduring importance of constitutional checks and balances in American democracy. Tariffs, taxes on imported goods, are among the oldest U.S. economic tools. For much of the 19th and early 20th centuries, high tariffs protected American industries. The Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act of 1930, blamed for worsening the Great Depression, led to a shift toward free trade. President Trump's America First agenda marked a sharp break from this consensus, arguing that free trade hollowed out U.S. manufacturing. His administration used tariffs to renegotiate trade deals and pressure countries like China, often bypassing international bodies. This confrontational, unilateral approach surprised even close allies with sudden tariff announcements. The legal battle over presidential power and trade policy began to unfold in the heart of the American judicial system, drawing national attention to the steps of the U.S. Court of International Trade. This courthouse, often overlooked, became the stage for a high-stakes confrontation between the executive branch and a coalition of American businesses. The conflict ignited when U.S. businesses and influential trade groups decided to challenge the sweeping tariffs imposed by the administration under the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, or IEPA. These groups, representing industries from manufacturing to agriculture, argued that the tariffs were causing real harm to American companies and workers, disrupting supply chains and raising costs across the country. The plaintiffs contended that the president had overstepped his authority by using a law designed for genuine national emergencies to pursue broad economic and trade objectives. They claim this move not only stretched the intent of IEPA, but also infringed upon Congress's constitutional power to regulate commerce, setting a dangerous precedent for future executive overreach. In the early stages, the administration found some success in the lower courts. Judges, wary of second-guessing the executive on matters labeled as national security, often deferred to presidential authority, citing the need for flexibility in times of crisis, even if the definition of emergency was hotly debated. Government lawyers vigorously defended the president's actions, insisting that IEPA granted the executive branch broad discretion to respond to foreign threats, whether economic or otherwise. They argued that the law's language was intentionally expansive, giving the president the necessary tools to act swiftly in a rapidly changing global landscape. Central to their defense was the political question doctrine, a legal principle suggesting that certain issues, especially those involving national security or foreign affairs, are best left to the political branches rather than the courts. The administration's attorneys maintained that judges should not second-guess the president's judgment on what constitutes an emergency, as these decisions require expertise and information not available to the judiciary. Buoyed by early court victories and the tradition of judicial deference in matters of national security, the administration projected confidence. Officials believed that this legal shield would protect their tariff policies from further judicial scrutiny, allowing them to continue using emergency powers as a tool of economic policy. But as the case moved up the judicial ladder, the stakes, and the questions about the limits of presidential power, only grew. In a 6-3 decision, the Supreme Court affirmed limits on presidential power. Chief Justice Roberts wrote that IEPA grants extraordinary powers for extraordinary circumstances, not a backdoor for unilateral economic policy. The majority rejected the idea that a declared emergency justifies sweeping executive actions with major economic impact. The court found that tariffs must be directly connected to resolving the specific emergency cited. Imposing universal tariffs was deemed too blunt and disconnected to address issues like fentanyl trafficking. This sets a new, stricter test for how future presidents can wield emergency authorities. The Supreme Court's decision immediately invalidates a significant set of tariffs imposed under the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, commonly known as IEPA. This landmark ruling has sent ripples through the economic landscape, altering the way international trade is conducted and reshaping the financial strategies of businesses across the nation. This includes the 10% fentanyl tariff on all Chinese imports, a measure that had been a point of contention for many importers and exporters. Additionally, similar threatened tariffs on goods from Mexico and Canada have been nullified, easing tensions and fostering a more cooperative trade environment between these neighboring countries. The decision is expected to enhance diplomatic relations and encourage smoother trade negotiations in the future. The administration's proposed universal 10% tariff on all imports is also nullified. This sweeping measure, which had been a source of concern for businesses relying on international goods, is now off the table, allowing companies to breathe a sigh of relief. The nullification is anticipated to stabilize prices and reduce the cost burden on consumers, who had been facing potential price hikes on everyday products. The removal of these measures brings immediate relief to importers of a wide range of goods. Retailers and businesses can now replenish their stocks without the looming threat of increased costs, ensuring that shelves remain filled with diverse products. This change is expected to boost consumer confidence and spending, as the fear of rising prices diminishes. However, many Trump-era tariffs remain, including those on steel and aluminum, which were enacted under different legal authorities. These tariffs have been a cornerstone of the previous administration's trade policy, aimed at protecting domestic industries from foreign competition. Despite the recent changes, these specific tariffs continue to influence the market dynamics and pricing strategies within the metal industries. These tariffs, imposed under Section 232 of the Trade Expansion Act, are unaffected and have withstood separate court challenges. They remain a critical component of the U.S. trade policy, designed to safeguard national security by ensuring the viability of key domestic industries. Legal experts suggest that any future challenges to these tariffs will face significant hurdles, given their established legal foundation. Industries relying on these metals, like auto manufacturing and construction, will not see immediate relief. The continued imposition of these tariffs means that companies in these sectors must navigate the complexities of higher material costs, which could impact production timelines and project budgets. As the trade landscape evolves, these industries will need to adapt and innovate to maintain competitiveness in a challenging economic environment. The economic impact of the Supreme Court's decision will be felt unevenly across the U.S. For consumers, the removal of broad IEEPA-based tariffs should lower prices and ease inflation. Industries dependent on imported materials from China will benefit from reduced costs and uncertainty. Politically, the ruling is a major blow to the president's authority and America First platform. The White House condemned the decision as judicial activism, setting the stage for renewed political battles. Meanwhile, Democrats and some Republicans hail the ruling as a victory for the rule of law and congressional authority. The Supreme Court's decision sent ripples through global markets, with stocks surging in Asia and Europe. The ruling is seen as a step toward de-escalating trade wars and reducing uncertainty for international markets. Foreign businesses exporting to the U.S. now face less risk of sudden emergency-based tariffs. Governments in Canada, Mexico, and the EU welcomed the decision as a positive shift toward rules-based trade. China urged the U.S. to respect the court's decision and uphold the multilateral trading system. Still, many other tariffs remain, and the ruling gives U.S. trading partners more leverage in future negotiations. Experts are already weighing the long-term impact of this decision on presidential power. Jennifer Hillman, former WTO appellate judge, calls it the most significant judicial check on presidential trade authority in nearly a century. The ruling draws a clear line. The executive cannot unilaterally rewrite economic laws. Future presidents will need a much stronger legal case to invoke emergency powers for economic purposes. This will likely push administrations to work with Congress on trade legislation rather than relying on executive orders. The result could be more stable and predictable trade policies. The Supreme Court's decision marks a new chapter for American trade policy. By curbing unilateral presidential power, the court has reframed the debate over trade. The answers to balancing domestic protection and global commerce will now be forged in Congress, not by decree. The ruling offers a chance to step back from global trade wars and repair relationships with key partners. It could bring greater stability and confidence for businesses and consumers. But political fallout may lead to further gridlock, and the administration's next moves will shape the global economy's future.